Here's a great movie, a forgotten classic from 1994. I remember when it came out. I've seen it probably 3 or 4 times. Every single time during my whole lifetime, over 25 years or so, I've really liked it. It's Robert Redford's Quiz Show. Let's take a look at why this movie's great, why I think people should watch it, analyze some of its ideas and themes coming up next.
So where'd you prep, Dick?
Dick's up here on a witch hunt. He thinks 21 is rigged.
Is it?
So Quiz Show is about an interesting but maybe trivial and mundane scandal. Quiz Show scandal of 1950s game shows on American television where the game shows were rigged. They weren't actually telling the truth about the contestants. I mean, the contestants were fed the answers, and then the TV executives picked who they wanted to win so that they could, get better audience ratings. And yet the audience thought it was all real. This was an interesting scandal, and I really like this movie as sort of a devil's bargain problem with the Wasp.
I got the guy.
The white American Anglo-Saxon Protestant played by Ralph Fiennes, who plays Charles Van Doren, an intellectual, a guy with a lot of degrees out of a New England Wasp culture, who takes the devil's bargain from the TV industry and helps rig the game show. This is a fantastic movie to analyze, to think about all of its political ideals, to think about what its worldview or a mix of worldviews could be. There seems to be that aspect here. It's an ethical movie. You can kind of tell that it wants you to reform your own ideas. It also wants to comment about America or American culture in the late 20th century. That's part of the reason why I find this movie fascinating. I don't necessarily agree with what I think it says sometimes, but I really agree with some of the other things I think it says. Plus, just to analyze it is really, really fun. And it's a perfect, sad, melancholic Frank Capra kind of movie where it mixes historical accuracy because it's based in history and with real people still living. It's commenting on real people who are alive, as it tells you in the end credits, with fantasy, with ideals, with philosophical dreams about what people wish America is and the disappointments about that. So it's a wonderful mix of realism and romanticism. That's the core Hollywood movie to me, which can work well as a middlebrow entertainment. Well, what I mean by middlebrow is it's trying to teach you something, it's trying to uplift, and it's trying to entertain all at the same time. And I feel like I'm learning something as well as being entertained. It's a good classic middlebrow movie to me. They made a lot of these at this time. They don't make enough of these today. Anyway, the plot, NBC, the game show 21 in the late 1950s. They've got a guy on it who's winning named Herbert Stemple, played by John Turturro. He's Jewish. That's important to the movie. And the TV executives are getting tired of him. The ratings are flatlining with him as winning on 21. So they decide, hey, let's rig the game and have this man who they discover he's a good-looking guy, a little charismatic for them, Charles Van Doren, and he's got a good background for them to talk about on the TV show. So they give Van Doren sort of a devil's agreement, probably call it a Faustian bargain, okay? And he's tempted by all the money they could offer. He's an instructor, I think, at Columbia University, but he only makes 80-some bucks a week, and they say, hey, we can make all this money. So he's tempted by them, and he eventually gives in. He helps rig the game show, which is a trivia question show. And then he starts to roll in the dough, but he has taken the devil's bargain. Now, there are a lot of layers to this movie. A lot of layers. Oh my goodness, I'll never get through them all in this video. I mean, first there's a sort of Kennedy-like investigator, congressional investigator played by Rob Morrow. And he's kind of sucked in and tempted into the world of American allure and desire. The opening of this movie is a couple of guys, and one of them is the investigator oogling over a car. I think it's a Chrysler 300. It's almost like erotic or sexual touching of the car. This fantasy item that's worth a lot of money, the allure of America. This movie has a plot arc that goes from that car and the oogling of it all the way to the U.S. Capitol building. The hopeful for this movie's worldview, I think, site of justice and truth, the American way of discovering truth, uncovering the quiz show scandal, which is what's going to happen in this movie. Anyway, this investigator eventually gets interested in trying to find out if this quiz show is rigged, and there's a grand jury investigation. And then the Jewish guy, Herbert Stemple, is annoyed. He's maybe envious of the Wasp, Charles Van Doren. So he's going to help open up and this investigation, but he may be also exaggerating or lying as well. And so this movie has sort of that tension of like Jewish envy in America versus the Wasp establishment, which, you know, that's a 50s thing. Then we're commenting on the 90s. Maybe this is a little touchy. Maybe we're dealing in stereotypes here, but that's what the movie deals with, in fact, is these guys' image on TV versus their behind-the-scenes personality and the sort of dirty dealings that they have. So this movie is about temptation and surface things like the car itself and the allure of money versus the truth, and like it's separating aesthetics and ethics. And people in America are too tempted by aesthetics, whether it's money or the allure of beauty, or here it's the TV screen and the surface qualities it shows versus what's behind the TV screen, which is a rigged game show. It's not really true what you're seeing on the screen. Don't give in to the false temptation. And sort of a lost innocence story where the audience will, when they discover the scandal, lose its innocence. They've believed in the TV show's truth, but then they realize it's all been a scam or fake. And the Wasp establishment is interesting in this because Van Doren is that generation that's giving in versus his father, who's a poet, sort of a voice of reason and truth in this, maybe the ultimate sort of person in this, who's disappointed by his son, who doesn't like the TV. He doesn't think TV is a good medium. And by the way, I think this movie is on his side to a great extent. So that's what's interesting about it. It's sort of castigating these guys who are involved in the rigging, and certainly the corporation, NBC, the TV executives, and the higher level executives, one of which is played by Martin Scorsese, interestingly enough. There's a little of Scorsese's After Hours vibe in this movie, if you can see it, if you've ever seen that movie. And then the TV game show sponsor Geritol, a medicinal or whatever pharmaceutical company that is needing the TV ratings to be high so that it can get its product out to the people. The intertwining of product placement, marketing, and TV here is being excoriated. Certainly with pharmaceutical companies, with medicinal companies, this is still a problem where the nightly news or new cable news shows, one of their major sponsors are big pharma corporations. That's what's coming up in this movie. So as the movie goes along, the investigator is going to prod and poke and get into and try to work out whether Charles Van Doren is involved in the scandal, and then hopefully get him to open up about, or get other people to open up. Maybe he will as well, and we'll come to the truth. This is kind of a JFK-like, a more honest and naive version of JFK, where the truth is going to be outed, that the dirty underbelly of American society, here it's the corporations, TV corporations involved with Geritol, that they have covered up things. We're going to uncover that via the U.S. Congress and congressional investigations, and this investigator played by Rob Morrow. Now, I really want to believe in that, but I feel like it's a 1950s liberal hope that is all wrong, because I'm a little bit more cynical maybe as a Gen X guy, or maybe the way I grew up, and I just don't believe that congressional investigations and these sort of faux trials that they have in Congress are in any way like an honest arena of truth revelation. To me, they're just as much theatrics as the TV game show here. But I think the movie misses out on that. In fact, the movie should know that, because it kind of, in parts, excoriates the McCarthy hearings in the 1950s, where it itself, the movie itself, or the scriptwriter, believes that Congress can put on these like theatrical trials that are fraudulent. Well, why is the one at the end of this movie any better or any different? And that's I think a flaw in this movie for me, in terms of my political ideologies and my beliefs in what human nature is. But I think one way you could rescue that is that the movie might be trying to be romantic in a Capra sort of way, like a Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. Hopefully our seat of justice in the federal government, the site of truth and revelation, will work out for us. And that's the hope and the dream. And maybe it's trying to be true to history to some extent. Although, of course, if you read about the historical accuracy of the movie, you'll see it's way more idealistic than it is accurate to actual history. Despite that, maybe that would drive people nuts, I find this movie pretty darn entertaining. I think all the acting performances in it are quite good. I love Turturro. I think this is the era where Turturro is fantastic just about everything. Do the Right Thing comes up for me, and Barton Fink. Ralph Fiennes is great in this, and Christopher McDonald is the game show host, and the list goes on. Scorsese, as I said, there's a bunch of people who show up in this movie, and they're all, I think, well cast, although I can't vouch for the accents of anybody in this movie. Maybe that could be a flaw if you knew the accents well. But the idea, I think, is a basic idea that reality TV and television theatrics was happening much earlier than we thought. We should have been on to, in the 1950s, the idea that TV is about ratings, a la the movie Network, which was much more darker, satirical, artistically complex, I think, than this movie. I think it's a fair comparison to look at Network versus this movie, but I recommend both, absolutely. The TV is not the medium you think it is. It is an entertainment medium, first and foremost, a la Neil Postman's Amusing Ourselves to Death. Here, that naivete of the audience in the 1950s is still there, and I think people didn't wake up to that even to the present day. It's like hard for people to really grasp that what they're seeing on TV is managed, shaped by advertising and by the desire to get more viewers, and those theatrical needs may trump any kind of like truthful thing going on TV, whether it's journalism or some kind of produced thing, like a game show or some musical kind of, contest show. And so this movie coming out in 1994, excoriating TV, maybe forecasting, it's describing the advent of reality TV, which is already upon people, and on all the implications of that. There's a bunch of movies at this time about this. Benny's Video from Michael Haneke, a very dark, cynical movie. Man Bites Dog from France. Ooh, that's a biting movie. And then later on, The Truman Show. There's a bunch of movies. This is a tried and true tradition, by the way. Movies like to excoriate their competitor, TV. And movies, you kind of know they're already fantasy. They're already made up. And they're not necessarily, this is not always true, not necessarily beholding to marketing, advertising, but TV is. And so they can say, well, we're reliant on our audience, but TV is reliant on advertising, which could be beholden to advertising, therefore it's fake and fraudulent. This is like a movies versus TV medium thing, and movies will always try to trump TV by saying they're more ethical than television. Just go watch, for example, Wag the Dog, the great movie I really love. But again, TV is the problem, and the movies are the ones that are going to expose that truth to us. This movie came out in a great year, 1994. It shouldn't be lost among all those movies because it does deserve. It might deserve the Oscar nomination. It deserves to be in maybe the top 10, 15 movies of the year. I think people should still watch it. I think the older I've gotten, I understand it better. Like, I can see the Charles Van Doren character, his temptations, this Herbert Stimple character's rage and anger about various things, even the allure that the TV executives have. Like, I can place myself as a middle-aged guy in all situations in this movie and kind of see where they're coming from. This movie hits me a little bit harder than it did when I was young, and that's just a personal comment. Well, what do you think of Quiz Show? Have you seen this movie? I suggest this for young people out there. Try it out. I don't know if this will watch well for millennials or Gen Z types, but maybe it will. Who knows? I really think this movie holds up, though, and I wonder how you could apply it to today if you could at all. Let us know about those things in the comments. Please subscribe to this channel for more great content. Thank you. Have a great day.